All right, we're back with another episode of the podcast, and I've got George Marano with me. George, good to be with you.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
What's your favorite vacuum cleaner?
The one that's not used by me.
Come on. There's a reason to this.
Yeah. Look, I mean, for the price, it has to be Dyson, right? So
interesting you say that, because that's exactly what we're talking about today. We're exploring Dyson. We're having a look at the founder. It's part of a series, and it's part of something new that we're doing this year. We're focusing on founders, their story, and founders that we can relate to through their products. Last episode, we spoke about Jeff Bezos and Amazon, and today we're talking about James Dyson. What have you learned from the Dyson story, or sort of what starts off being apparent to you before we dig into the actual Dyson journey?
Yeah, there's a natural curiosity to James Dyson, and you can see that in his upbringing, his schooling, his aptitude for engineering and art and so forth. And if you see, him at a younger age, he goes to design schools, he goes to School of Arts and so forth. But people like James Dyson, I like to refer to as a 20-year overnight success, right? So he has a history.
Literally.
Yeah, he is, right?
Yeah.
So he's got that history where, he invented that sea truck, first of all, and then he made that ball wheelbarrow, right?
Yep.
So he already had something in him, right? And he went away, and it was a design fault in traditional vacuum cleaners with a bag, and then using his engineering background and that curiosity, that kind of led him to it, right?
We all know what Dyson is, how successful Dyson is as a business. We're not going to go into that, but we're going to talk about the journey. And a big element of his journey is failure.
Yeah.
Because after he walked away from the wheelbarrow business, he went out on his own, and it took him 14 years to crack the Dyson vacuum cleaner business. And failure is a word that we look at differently in different cultures.
Yeah.
Right? Business failure in Australia is viewed very differently to business failure in the UK or in the US.
Yeah.
Let's dig on that and let's explore failure. 14 years, not many people can cope. 14 years of trial and error and failure before cracking it. What's your perspective on that, and what does your work show around the concept of dealing and coping with failure and not giving up?
Yeah, look, I mean, in failure in different contexts mean different things. In Australia, like say for instance in bankruptcy, in Australia it's like this black stain across your name, as opposed to America where it's like kind of a badge of honor. Right? Why do we have failure? Well, it's whatever you're offering the market doesn't want, right? So you really need to look at failure as almost like experimentation.
Yep.
Right. So looking at it from that, but we talk about failure on paper, one-dimensionally, but it is a very emotional process, and it depends on the individual, their capacity to take on risk.
It's bloody hard, right?
Yeah.
Like to cop it.
Yeah.
And to keep going.
Yeah, of course.
And to not give up. 14 years. I mean, a year is hard.
Yeah.
Right? How many people would actually keep going after 3 failures?
Well, I mean, and we're looking at it, you're looking at it individually. You can just imagine the individuals around him saying, is this really working? 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but you've really got to take your hat off to people like that, especially with regards to their persistence, right? Because, I mean, many people fail, and then they go back and question themselves, what if I gave it a little bit more? What if I gave it a little bit more?
Sure.
But the people like James Dyson, they just keep going at it. And you need to have a real strong sense of will,
How is failure different to experimentation?
Well, yeah, a failure is catastrophic, right? Things fall over. Whereas experimentation is more design, where you fail small, you fail fast.
You're expected to fail.
Yeah,
right?
and you learn from it as well, right? So you're ideally, what you're doing is you're experimenting and you're trying to decrease the amount of uncertainty there is in whatever it is that you're doing. And that's what we do actually in science and in academia and so forth. Hypothesis testing and observation, right?
Yeah. So for me, it's really important to frame it as experimentation, to be very mindful that in business you need to go through an experimentation phase,
absolutely,
particularly at the beginning.
Yeah.
And if you don't continue to experiment, you die, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And failure is you are expected to fail. You are not expected to succeed in an experimentation process, right?
Yeah, look, and the experimentation process has to happen constantly. You're right about that. And the reason for that is because in our external environment is always changing. So you need to experiment with what's going on, and that's the only real way of finding that out, right? Finding the information, bringing it back into your organization, and then kind of testing it in the market, right? Using that test and then taking the data and the findings from that, and then redoing that over and over again. Okay,
persistence. Because you can continue to experiment, and you could also argue that you can fall into a trap where you blame experimentation for not working out. Oh, I'm experimenting. I'm not meant to win. But that persistence and then turning it into an innovative process, what does that look like?
Well, first of all, you've got to be careful of the naysayers. Yeah. Persistence is really key. You need to be driven, right? You need to, shut out the external noise from the outside, especially from those around you. You have to have a strong sense of will, and be mindful that results. The time it takes to get results is unknown, right? I like to the train of thought that I have is that when I started my business, I said, well, when am I going to get my first client? I said, within the first year. I was predicting the first year, but my expectation was at least 2 years.
Yeah.
So I always double my expectations and go, I need to, this is not the worst case scenario, but a realistic case scenario, and prepare yourself mentally for it.
I think Dyson's an amazing guy, because when he went out on his own second time round in his 40s, he starts to work on the vacuum cleaner, and he knows that he can't go into production. So he starts licensing the concept out.
Yeah.
And he just keeps getting screwed one after another. Yeah. The Japanese screw him. He goes to VAX and they lead him on, and he has to go to court. And it's just, it is an unbelievable triumph over adversity.
Yeah.
That's not 2,000 years ago. That's not some Roman or obscure ancient fable. It is a real life example, and you can walk into today and see that product, and many of it happen in our homes.
Yeah.
And it's all built around that innovative process. And I know you do a lot of work around innovation. What does that innovative process have to look like for you to have that persistence?
Well, that goes back innovation, basically. I mean, there's a fine line between innovation and product development.
What is it?
Well, innovation is taking two or more processes from whatever's being done, brought together for something revolutionary.
Yep.
In some senses, the Dyson vacuum cleaner is is revolutionary in the sense that we moved away from using a bag, and then he's got this particular process that is developed.
So you reckon it's not innovative?
It's innovative in the way that it tackles, in the way that it actually captures and stores the dirt.
Yeah,
right?
In a barrel as opposed to a bag.
Yeah, in a barrel as opposed to a bag. That is kind of like a form of micro innovation.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But the vacuum cleaner still exists. All he's done is he's just kind of made it function better now. So I mean, it's questionable, but it is innovative in some sense, right?
I mean, he's an engineer who's an artist, right? But he doesn't over-engineer what people want from a domestic vacuum cleaner.
Yeah,
he gives them something better than the existing, which was an annoying vacuum cleaner where you have to go out and buy bags.
Yeah.
So he takes the bag out.
Yeah.
But then he improves it in certain areas that matter.
Yeah.
And not in areas that don't, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a pain kind of the quality of suction goes down, especially as the bag gets full, and then the emptying out process and so forth. So, I mean, he's done extremely well in that. Yeah, he hasn't had to do much. He's done a lot, but not much in the overall scheme of things.
Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You do the things that matter well, and that is what makes a difference, rather than getting caught in things that you can, innovate on, but don't matter to the average household that's sweeping up dog hair.
Yeah, and look, I just want to add something else in regards to that. Innovation has an older brother. It's called commercialization, and we always talk about innovation, but not actually the commercialization aspect of it. You can innovate till the cows come home, right? But however, is there a market for it?
Well, this brings up the next point for me: the difference between design, commercial design, and engineering.
Yeah.
Because I can over-engineer or under-engineer, or I can design and listen to the market, and then use that feedback loop to continue to improve my product.
Yeah, and that's really, it's an interesting point you've raised, and something that I've gone through, especially when you're talking to people such as software developers and so forth. You ask them for a Toyota Corolla, and they try to give you a Ferrari. So there, you have to have that. You have to be able to have that ability to understand engineering, but also the commercial aspects as well, right? Because sometimes what you're offering is, third or fourth generation ahead of what's already out there.
Yes.
And in these instances, what you need to do is catch up. You look at the Dyson vacuum cleaner. The first generation of vacuum cleaners was that bag vacuum cleaner. The second generation was his bagless one, and then it sort of evolved over time.
It's still a stick.
Yeah.
It's still a broom.
Yeah.
Right. You take broom, and then you take first generation vacuum cleaner, and you look at that, evolution. It's in micro steps, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then over time, that persistent innovation sees the difference between a Dyson today and that clunky Hoover 30 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. But you also need to have the commercial smarts to understand, right? Is that you need to take a minimum viable product, right, to the market, the bare minimum. Right?
Yeah.
And then for your own commercial well-being, have multiple iterations of it over time, and they usually come as you set up an R&D facility, and as you get feedback from the market and so forth, and then you come back with multiple products. And you can see now, a Dyson has one of those automated vacuum thingies, right? So, but that couldn't have happened unless the first part.
Yeah, if you have a look at this and compare it to the first generation iPhone, for example,
or even from a BlackBerry,
from a BlackBerry or a Nokia or so on, that process is done, gradually over time. But that excellence in design and that engineering background helps you continue to do that, because otherwise you turn out like a BlackBerry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where they stopped and they got killed.
Yeah. BlackBerry, Nokia, the list goes on and on and on, right? And how important it is, to stay, what I like to call, I use this term called measured paranoia, right? Where you're always wondering what's happening out there.
That's a pretty cool way.
Yeah. So you've got, you're not paranoid in front of mind, but you're paranoid at the back of mind. You're always wondering or worrying slightly what's out there, what's new, what could affect my business model, what should I be changing, And if you're not changing, then that's your biggest problem.
Okay, change. He's in a business. For those of you that don't know the Dyson story, he's in a business that he founds the wheelbarrow business. Late 20s. Is in there. It grows, and then he starts to hate it because he's got stakeholders, he's got shareholders, he's got a board of directors. He starts to lose control. And an important element of this is when he leaves and he starts Dyson, the vacuum cleaning business, he makes a commitment that he's always going to keep control. He learned a very painful lesson. How common is that in business?
Absolutely. I mean,
I know you like that topic a lot.
I'm all about autonomy. right? And one of the things for me is that I'm happy to grit my teeth and bear the pain of doing things alone. But however, I know at the end, right, I keep control, I keep autonomy, I keep equity, right? I can shape the vision of the organization how I want. I know what to do. I don't have anybody to talk, I don't have anybody dictating to me what to do and how to do it, right? For their own self, sorry, I just want, my own self-interest, right? My self-interest is that, I want an organization that lives and breathes my values and those who share those values as well, right?
Yeah.
And however, once you get the corporate, the hand of corporate or VC or something like that come in,
you turn it into like a monster claw.
Like a claw, right?
Yeah.
They come in and what's their motive? Yeah, their motive is for you to success so that they can cash out on it.
Sure,
right?
they're an aligned stakeholder.
Yeah, right.
Most of the time.
Yeah, and you don't know whether they're a passive investor or an active investor, but however that can change. Passive investors can change very, very quickly. Right. So, and what you envision, for your company and so forth can in a very short space of time be taken over. And if you're like Mr. Dyson, and you've got all these these corporate partners, they have very deep pockets and they can kind of string you out until they can kick you out of your board. And there are plenty of examples out there where founders, over time have been kicked out of their own company.
But don't you think there's a lot more examples? The graveyard of entrepreneurship is so big because people don't grow. You go out and you start a venture and you're on your own, and because you don't have that ecosystem of a founder or advisors or investors helping you out, you end up getting caught in this, which is your own mind, and it stops you from growing. Don't you think that is a greater risk than having people annoying you?
It is, but this is where you also need that. You also need to be able to get external help, without finding a partner.
So you're saying get all the benefits of having partners, but not the baggage of giving them equity or sharing in that relationship.
I mean, it's very easy. You get a business coach or a consultant or something.
So date, don't marry.
Yeah. No, that's different. That's different, right? But you get a consultant, get a business coach, get all the help you can.
Yep.
But my advice to everybody and my own personal philosophy is never give away equity. Right?
Equity is the most expensive.
Equity is the most expensive. You give it, and it's impossible to get back.
It's very hard to get it back unless you reach a certain scale.
Right.
And equity is the reason why a lot of business relationships do go sour.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the expectations of each equity holder over time starts to drift, and it takes a very strong founder to be able to pull that together.
Yeah. I mean, depending on the kind of legal agreements you have and so forth. But however, it worked for Jeff Bezos. He owns 13%, I think, of Amazon, but it's still $100 and something million, right? $130 or $140 million stake, right?
Billion.
Yeah, sorry, billion. Yeah.
I think for us, in my own example, I've been very fortunate to have good business partners around me. And if we go back and have a look at the foundation, we did bring on a venture capital investor at the beginning, and it forced us to pull our socks up and set into place a really good governance structure where we knew the expectations of each other and everybody knew the expectations of us. So I think if you do go into that relationship, you got to do it properly. The worst thing is partnerships or equity relationships where the foundation, the substance isn't done properly.
And look, you're correct. But also, if you are starting off, it's actually a really good experience to have partners.
That's true.
I'm talking about this as somebody, I'm 46, who's had multiple partnerships, and with multiple failures. So
as you get older,
you kind of know what you want, right? You bring on partners very, very reluctantly.
What's your final advice? And I didn't expect to end on this, but we're here, and I'd like to draw upon your expertise. What's your advice for someone watching this that is in business with partners, then they are in a relationship or they're in a situation where they're not happy, they don't have that good structure,
Yeah.
they don't want to get out because they still love their business, but they're just not comfortable, you know? Someone that's in a bad marriage, equivalent business-wise, or a marriage that's not going too good.
Well, I really can't talk about
I'm drawing the analogy only.
I think you just need to be honest with your partners and have that very frank discussion, right? I mean, communication is the key to all this.
Yeah.
And just say, look, I don't really like the direction of this. And so I have a fear that, we might be going down a path that we might collapse or we might fail.
Yeah.
Right.
Or I'm just not happy.
I'm just not happy.
Even if we succeed, I'm not really happy with.
I don't like what's happening. I don't like, the way we're going about things. And that's really all you can do is have really frank and open, honest discussion. And life is short. If you're not happy with something, go and do it again.
Yeah. Right? Life's too short to be in a bad relationship, and particularly in a bad business relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because business is changing every day, and every day that you're in is a day that you're not doing something that you love or something that you could be doing better.
Personally, I like a complicated professional life and a very simple personal life, right? So, just be mindful, right? That, you could, if it gets extremely toxic from a professional perspective, you can eventually bring that home with you.
Yeah, bring it home, your friends, your family, it changes who you are. You see a lot of people that, the toll of a bad business relationship manifests in their life overall. Guys,
and you can always start again.
Absolutely, particularly in a country like Australia.
Yeah.
Right, where the ecosystem is designed to give people a fair go. All right, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. The book is James Dyson, Against the Odds. You can find it. It is a rare book, so it's not one of those bestsellers.
I had a look on Amazon. It's like $560.
Yeah, it's $560 on Amazon because you have to go through certain, niche booksellers to buy it. So don't be freaked out when you jump on and see it on Amazon. There are a lot of, I think you can get it for about $50 from an independent. There are a few independent bookstores out there. It's also available on Audible.
Okay.
You can listen to it as an audiobook. So I'd encourage you guys to get to it. George, thank you very much. Very gracious for your time, and I look forward to the next episode.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, guys.